So if you missed the thumbnail, go back and look at it, and then watch this video. So, Malfurion's Quest by Turnro. Wow. Well, if you didn't laugh at the joke that the thumbnail is, then you might not laugh at this review, because it's going to be overwhelmingly negative, and it's the same sort of vein as that humor. I gotta say, if you are a Blizzard guy, if you're into Blizzard stuff, you'll like this campaign, actually. That's the only grounds I can seriously recommend this campaign on, is if you think that Blizzard did a good job with their base campaigns and you don't mind not having any fucking voice acting in a really long campaign with hours of cutscene material that you are going to have to read, usually out loud to the stream people. Well, in that case, you'll love it. But in the case that you are a living, breathing human being and not a living whole, you'll probably get pretty frustrated at various points in this production. I just don't understand the kind of individual who would release this publicly. I kind of get making anything, because when you have your own personal attachment, it's very easy to just ignore qualitative standards, and whether or not you think that other people should have to feel obligated in any way to play this. Not that they necessarily should, even in the context that it is released, but the idea that you're putting it out there, like somebody's going to download it and play it, and if they've already downloaded it and they've already booted it up, they're going to play at least one mission to completion. And if you just played that first mission to completion, then you've already been scarred for life, so you might as well just keep going. And I just don't understand. Although, by the same argument, you've kind of already experienced everything there is to experience about the entire campaign by the end of that first map. So maybe you can quit while you're ahead. Maybe that's a possibility. Malfurion's Quest is a very puzzling campaign for me, because I only checked it out, and admittedly only really checked it out at all, not just in part of Svetli's thing, but that was the reason. It was because Svetli made Fate of Ashen Vale, and while I was playing it, everybody said it was a carbon copy of Malfurion's Quest. And I said, oh, well, hopefully Malfurion's Quest is better than that makes it sound like, because think about it. If something as bad as Fate of Ashen Vale was, and something as annoying and buggy as that campaign was to play and to suffer through, if that's how it was, but it was inspired by something else, like, how bad do you have to be to inspire that? And I know that's sort of like saying, how vile of a human being do you have to be to have your followers, your Twitter followers or whatever, like, start sending death threats to people. So it doesn't really necessarily equate responsibility. I'm not saying Turnro's responsible for Fate of Ashen Vale directly as, like, he should be held responsible. I mean, theoretically, he is literally responsible, because without his campaign, Fate of Ashen Vale wouldn't exist in the same way Svetli would never have copied it, because it wouldn't have existed. But I'm not trying to hold him accountable for that, like, in a more moral sense, whatever the fuck that means. I don't know why this is even in the discussion about the qualitative review of a product, but you get the idea. And so, at the end of the day, when it comes down to Malfurion's Quest existing, I just find it really funny that, like, the fact that it could have given birth to something like Fate of Ashen Vale immediately sent the wrong message to me. Which, again, is not really fair, and I recognize that wasn't really fair. And so I decided, maybe what we can do instead is we can actually just play it. We'll just play it on stream next. I mean, it can't be that long. And then I played it for 16 hours, and half of that was in one stream. So there you go. 3. So I gotta say, Turnro really out-Blizzarded Blizzard, like I said at the beginning. You got some real good Blizzardisms in here. If you're a Blizzard guy, you'll love this campaign. But it's a campaign that's really confusing to me, not just because Svetli copied it, and he did. Don't let him tell you otherwise. But also because this campaign has a lot of attention driven to it. Like over in the Hive Workshop, for example, if you look at the release thread, or the development thread rather, for this campaign, it's got so many posts. So many people are saying, like, wow, this is so well written. I can't wait for your storyline, for the Sentinel storyline to come out in a later patch, and I can't wait for you to update this, and I'm really looking forward to this and that. And, like, it's got a lot of engagement. And so you must think, well, if people are this engaged and this hyped over a single-player campaign for Warcraft III, it's got to have something to it, right? Like, you can't just assume that everybody on the internet is a fucking degenerate, despite their browsing history suggesting otherwise. And yet their browsing history was correct. They are indeed into orc porn. So you'll get no argument from me. But let me tell you, they were all fucking wrong. They were all wrong. Not a single person knew what the fuck they were talking about, especially people who complimented the writing. But here's the thing. Before you can even really look at the writing in this campaign, and I don't recommend you look at this campaign because the end of it is literally a giant rock black Malfurion running at a bunch of enemies or a bunch of orcs or something. So that's just depressing to realize. But so, yeah, whatever. You know, don't look at it. But look at the storyline. But before you look at the storyline, before you look at the storytelling, just look at the gameplay. And there's a reason why we have these chains of events here. There's a reason why you start out looking at what you're playing and trying to analyze that. Figure out what the fuck is going on with your inputs and how the game is receiving those inputs and what's happening as a result of that. Because the gameplay is hopefully, and I can't believe that needs to be said, where most of the players' playtime, most of the players' experience will be had. They're not going to be watching like 45-minute long cutscenes. They're not going to be watching like endless amounts of unengaging drivel while the story catches up to what the player just did for the last half hour. They're not going to be interrupted constantly. They're not going to be, reading a bunch of shit instead of having voice acting. They're not going to be smashing shit in the middle of their review. They're just going to be experiencing the gameplay. And as a result, your gameplay needs to tell a story that is consistent with the dialogue and the pacing and everything else that you wanted out of the game and out of your story. If your gameplay is telling you a story about how incompetent your enemies are, the player's enemies, then what, as a writer, do you have in your toolbox? How can you make it so that these opponents, these antagonists, are seemingly competent again? Well, you can't in the gameplay, so you would have to tell the player explicitly and sort of like retcon, but within the same 2 feet of gameplay or storytelling experience. You'd have to retcon that shit. You'd have to be like, oh, forget what you just saw about your enemies being complete idiots and doing nothing and not responding at all to any sort of stimulus. Forget about that. They're not actually vegetables. They're actually really brilliant tacticians, and you should feel accomplished for defeating them. When you have to say that in dialogue, because that's what the storyline mostly consists of. The storytelling mostly consists of people being completely incompetent and then you defeating them or them surprising you somehow, even though their twist is always stupid, and then you still defeating them. Despite the fact that that happens every single time, and despite the fact that nobody, even your own character, Malfurion, displays a lick of sense and a lick of competence, you still have to realize, like, despite the fact that all of that happens, the writing still tells you that the stakes are high, and that was a close one, and that was a hard-fought battle, and you didn't just, one-punch man yourself to victory here because there's no gameplay. It's just cutscenes and QuickTime events. You didn't do that. That's not what happened. It was a really hard-fought battle, man. Trust me. Don't you trust the dialogue? Man, don't you trust the, writing? You don't, because you played it. And you know that actually all you had to do was, like, dance around this guy in human form and then smack him in tree form or something. You know that it was just all hollow. You know that there was never really any threat of you losing. And you know that the entire gameplay loop was built around quick saving, as opposed to actually trying to live with the results of your choices, because Warcraft 3 isn't really about choices, and especially not if you remove the fucking macro elements of it, like most of this game's running time. So, of course, the gameplay is not really about facilitating the growth of the characters and the establishment of how competent these characters are. It's really about showing how terrible the characters are at doing anything, and also about contradicting the writing that later establishes them and reaffirms them as competent individuals. And that's really the nut of it, I think. I don't think you can get past that initial barrier, which is like the most obvious critique you could levy at most mediums, especially gameplay, especially video games, rather, where almost all the time, especially in Blizzard's own works, by the way, you'll have characters that are painted as villains that are worth your respect as a player and worth your character's respect as an individual set in this setting, and yet you trounce over them, or the engagements are just unfair, and of course they're going to win as a result of that. And either way, you're still expected to believe that these people are deserving of the position and that they should be taken seriously and that they should be respected. And it's not because of some arbitrary shit that they won, or it's not because they're an idiot that they lost. It's just because, hey, that's just how it is, man. That's their writing. Dude, they're written so well. So I really got to say, I thought we would be here for longer, honestly. That is really the nut of this campaign's falling apart. The point at which it all unraveled was when you just realize, wait, these characters are retarded, and all of their men are retarded. And they just sit there, and you walk up and you pull some of them away in a microsection, and most of them don't follow you, and some of them leash, and you kill them, and you just repeat that a few times, and wow. That's supposed to be a real living entity. That's supposed to be a member of the Burning Legion. That's not supposed to be a living whole, and yet it is. And I will say that if you actually want an experience, maybe you should try Svetli's campaign, Fate of Ashenvale, because that was much funnier. At least that had me fucking howling. This campaign was just living whole energy. That was like the high point, and it was really just like a sad chuckle. It was not nearly as funny as Bear Blower. Man, it's really sad when Svetli is like a 16-year-old guy and he like thinks, oh, people like Turnro's campaign, so I'll copy that. And he does it, and it's incompetent entirely, and like all of the dialogue has been translated to Chinese and then back to English a few times, and nobody's tested it. The guy himself admitted to not testing it on my stream, and tells you that you should have saved, even though you were never in danger of losing. And the only reason you should have saved is because his triggers didn't work, and if you had saved, you could have reloaded and tried a different pattern on his puzzle to unlock the Archimon boss fight, because that makes sense. It's really sad when that's a better experience, and it's all because of a joke. It's all because of somebody's last name being Bear Blower. I don't even remember her first name, but I'll always remember her last name. Will I remember anything about Malfurion's quest? Probably not. Will I even remember to check it out when 2.0 is released and I can play as a good guy? Probably not. Will I be healthier for not playing the future version of this? Yeah, absolutely. I am really looking forward to not having to play that. I'm really looking forward to people not sending me a link to that and not telling me how to play that on an older version of Warcraft 3 because Reforged breaks everything. I'm really looking forward to that not being part of my reality, not being part of this simulation. And I think I've articulated precisely why I'm looking forward to that, actually. Because there was no worth to the experience that I had. The only quest that I can possibly have, and it's not blowing bears, surprisingly. It's actually just linking random parts of this mishmash psychosis to people like Mesk, who are just going to shit themselves with laughter at the fact that somebody released this and that thousands more downloaded it. And that hundreds of thousands more watched other people suffer through it on YouTube. Man, that's a simulation. So those are my final words for you. Malfurion's quest. His quest was apparently to have a random toilet that he drank from completely fuck his mind, Alex Jones style, and change his character in under an hour. And then after that, he mostly was just an idiot, but everybody else in the campaign was more of an idiot, including his own allies that would eventually go on to try to betray him in the most stupid manner possible, and then they would die in the most stupid manner possible. And every time they died, every time there was a magic sapping arrow, he was sure to tell you through dialogue by having the character that shot the arrow say, "I shot you with a magic sapping arrow, and it has the power to stop you from using magic. Bye." Like, oh, kill Jaden and shit, man.